So on the one hand, they're telling us, we've had a great victory. We've managed to get the migrant bill through the House of Lords and the House of Commons. We've managed to get rid of all of the sort of lefty amendments that the bishops put on. And now we've got a proper bill. And then you go, well, what can you do? Nothing, actually. Nothing at all.
Well, I think we've been through this before. All we need to do is talk to the Australians and get the people who were behind their policy over here and implement it, because the treaties allow us to do it. We actually, with a bit of will, we can stop the boats and we can actually make a big change. And as you were saying about, you know, plasterers and plumbers and other people, this big issue for me is apprenticeships. You know, at the end of the day, we have probably 3 or 4 businesses that have 50 or so apprentices.
Yeah.
We have trouble finding decent colleges to teach them in, so we're actually now having to address putting together our own apprentice scheme to try and produce electricians and plumbers. I've been tweeting about this. You know, there's apprenticeship levy, which is another administrative burden on all of the businesses, particularly smaller businesses that train these people. When all we really need is a tax break. We don't need the government involved in telling us how to do it. We're quite capable of doing it. And rather like, you know, James Dyson, who said there's a shortage of mechanical engineers and designers, he set up his own university to teach these people. The bottom line is, you know, when I tweet about it, I get sort of buried by the lunatics who accuse me of being an exploitive employer and everything else. Well, that's not true. Ultimately,
well, why? You know, what's wrong with employing people? What
we're trying to do is teach people to do useful trades. They also, well, did your children go to university? Well, the answer is yes, they did.
Yeah.
That's the current fashion. But my son, who's now working at one of our businesses, he did politics and sociology at Leeds, whereas my grandfather, who set the business up in 1923, he was 100 years old in March, he did his apprenticeship in Oxford. So, you know, I think Rishi Sunak is right. There are some ridiculous degrees. I mean, one in, I think I read one in comic and one in e-sport. You know, there's all sorts of, you know, useless degrees which people go and do, and it doesn't teach them to do anything functional.
No. And what do you think has gone wrong then with the training systems in this country? You know, why do we not have enough bricklayers? Why do we not have enough people learning that trade or becoming plasterers? Why?
Because I think, you know, in this country we're taught that, we've always been taught that trade is bad and that, you know, the professions are good. It's almost embedded into our culture.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, you know, we've got now a civil service that's got far too big and bloated. As you and I would agree, I don't know why their salaries are going up 5%. They should be down 5% on the basis of productivity.
And we learned today, there's a story in one of the papers today saying that civil servants and sort of, you know, public sector employees retire 3 years earlier than private sector employees. Well, why is that?
Because they've got an index-linked pension, and the contribution to their pension during their working life is huge compared with the private sector. And actually the private sector that funds all of this nonsense, well, it isn't actually now. As we know, it's quantitative easing. And since 2008, what we've basically been doing is the analogy I use is we're a bit like somebody who's eating baked beans with a Porsche sitting out on the patio in front of them. And as I say to a lot of my people, I'm never going to get cross with you for driving a beaten up old VW and having a couple of million in the bank. But I will get cross with you for basically putting up a facade which is completely wrong.
Yeah.
I think the country now is deluding itself. I think we are heading, for the biggest economic calamity that we've ever seen. And we're a bit like the lemmings. We've sort of gone over the cliff and we're just waiting to fall now. Yeah. But people don't seem to understand that. And the only way out, again, will be for the state to cut and run, print money, and create vast inflation. Because, you know, there are so many people now in this country who expect to be looked after and they're not prepared to work. So I honestly find it depressing and it's refreshing, as I said, to come onto your show and hear a bit of common sense for a change. I sometimes wonder whether I was born in a past era, which is no longer relevant.
But I mean, there are plenty of us around. You just have to kind of search them out. And luckily, many of them are listening and watching this show right now, because people have great ideas. I mean, I get more ideas for how this country should be run from the viewers of this show and from the and listeners and the people who call in than a month of Sundays I would get from any MPs. Because how can you on the one hand say we're going to kick all these people out, 170,000 people who have got the right to claim asylum should they wish to, but what happens? I always say this to people who are in government: what happens if you turn their asylum claim down and there's 170,000 people who need to be deported? Where are you going to deport them to? How is that going to work? Nobody knows. Nobody can give me that answer.
That's because we lack the will. We can actually return them to France under the current treaties if we were strong enough to do that. And we would all agree that we're paying France a hell of a lot of money.
We are.
The French, there is if you were to write an essay to say French, are they our friend or our foe? I think you could make an equal number of cases that they're our foe rather than our friend if you study your history. But
yes.
At the end of the day, they are a very different people to us, and I don't think they're helping the situation. And I think a lot of the sort of people who want to create this European superstate, which has been the post-war plan, they're keen to see us flooded with immigration because it means ultimately that managing our own borders has failed, and that our rotten establishment will be even keener to leap back into the European fray, which if you read between the lines with Keir Starmer, that's pretty much what I think they're planning to do.
Yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised. I mean, I remember going back to, I suppose, around about 2007, I think it was, bought a house in Scotland, needed some plasterers to come in, couldn't find any plasterers who were actually Scottish, and ended up hiring a load of Polish guys who were brilliant, did a great job, but they all came here. If you remember, Tony Blair said about 15,000 Polish people will come to work in Britain, and it turned out about 1 million people came, and they all worked very hard, and they all paid their taxes, and they collected their child benefit, and they continued to collect their child benefit after their kids had gone home, and for all I know, they're still collecting child benefit. It's an incredibly bad, porous system that just doesn't work.
Well, to be fair to the Polish people, they were incredibly talented, and as artists,
no, they were brilliant. I mean,
tradesmen, they're brilliant because, again, Poland, unlike us, Poland has, in recent memory, had a communist state there. They've all been oppressed. The only way to survive in a sort of communist stroke, deeply socialist state is to lie and cheat.
Right.
And as we know, most people behind the Iron Curtain learned very well to lie. And that's not a society I want to live in. So, but, they're very good people. They worked extremely hard. And do you know what, Mike? They really appreciated the fact that they were free.
Yeah.
So they were celebrating, all this oppression that we had really during the communist era. And suddenly they were free. They could do what they wanted. They were extremely resourceful. They respected, our laws and our way of life. And they came and helped us. That's fine. I have no problem with targeted immigration. I think it's good. What I object to is people who queue jump, basically knocking or bumping those out who are actually doing it legally. Right. And yet our system and our state, and I look at all of the red tape that we come across now when you're trying to run a normal legal business, which is paying its taxes in huge amounts now. The frictional sort of cost of doing this with the state now inserted so far into all of our lives is huge. And yet there are so many of them, and they're all being, as you say, given these huge pensions, which are index linked, which ultimately are going to be a large cause of what I think is a huge economic downturn coming very soon.
Yeah, absolutely right, because we're paying loads and loads of people to produce absolutely nothing. And all they're doing
less than nothing,
is
Mike.
pushing paper around.
Getting in the way.
Yeah.
Getting in the way.
I know.